Welcome to Thursday Aspirations, a time, a place and a space for teachers seeking a brighter future. We're going to look at should you quit teaching? 5 key questions that you can ask yourself and then 2 tests. So stay with us. I will give you links to those tests and I think you'll find them informative, whether you think you might want to leave teaching or you definitely want to stay, but it's still good to do the test. So the 5 points or the 5 questions that you might ask yourself, the first one really is the Sunday, what I call the Sunday evening test. It's when you think about how you are on a Sunday evening faced with a week of teaching coming up. At this time when things are very challenging, I think, for teachers, they're challenging for schools, they're challenging for the whole education sector. We've got a government, as I speak to you, pretty much in free fall. We've got all sorts of chaos going on, and the chance that there's going to be a real cutback on teachers and teachers' salaries and so on. So apart from everything else, the overall situation looks a bit bleak at the moment, and it could be that your spirits drop a bit on Sunday. So if that's so, then maybe it's worth looking at the other 4 tests to see whether maybe you should be thinking about doing something different. And the second one that you might want to consider is, what do you want to be doing in 5 years' time? What would you think would be satisfying in 5 years' time? Do you want to be just where you are now? Do you see yourself, you may be at the top of your pay scale, you may be fairly settled in what you do, but pitching forward 5 years, is that what you want to be doing in 5 years' time, exactly what you're doing today, or with slight modifications? Or is there the beginnings of a urge inside you to explore doing something different, whether moving to a different college or school, or indeed moving out of the education sector altogether and using your very considerable skills and abilities in another sphere? So the third question that you might want to think about in relation to that is the question of whether there is more for you to offer in your professional life. Do you sense that with the training that you've had, that and with the experience that you've got, and with your own inner sense of what you can accomplish in your life, that there's actually something in your professional life that you should be doing that's different? I mean, it could be you want to make changes in your work-life balance, most of us do, but is it that if you take your professional life, do you want to take all that you are as a teacher, all the gifts that you've got as an individual, and apply them somewhere else and perhaps be paid better for them, perhaps have greater freedom? And if the answer to that one is yes, then maybe you should move on to the 4th question, and you should ask yourself the question whether you are currently stressed. Is this a problem that you are facing, that you are considerably stressed? And when you are stressed, sometimes the problem is you don't realize that you're stressed. It's a paradox that because you're so stressed, there's no time to take a step back, take a breath and say, hang on a minute, what am I doing to my health? What am I doing to my long-term well-being? And in relation to that, I promised you 2 tests that you can consider. And the first one is this, and it's BeMindfulOnline.com. All right. So if you look up BeMindfulOnline.com, you can find the Test Your Stress test. It's running along the bottom of the screen at the moment. So scribble that down. It's really interesting to do. It's a series of very short questions, and it's entirely subjective in the sense that it's just asking you to put yourself on a scale for each of the questions. But at the end of it, if you're honest of how it feels inside you, you'll have a fairly clear idea of whether, at least in relation to this test, you are in a situation of stress. And a high level of stress sustained over a period of time, firstly, it's not a satisfying life. And secondly, it is quite likely to undermine your health. So it's a good question to ask, even if you say, no, look, I want to stick with teaching, but then you might want to say, okay, how am I going to reduce stress in my life as a teacher? The final one, the final question, I think is really very important because it raises the question about the school or college that you're teaching in. And it asks, is the situation that I'm in currently toxic? In other words, am I in an environment that is toxic? And that is what is generating the stress. That is why on a Sunday night, I don't particularly feel like going in to teach the next day. I faced the prospect of the coming week with some level of trepidation because the school or college is somewhat toxic. And there's a very interesting test you can do in relation to this, and that's running at the bottom of the screen at the moment. So look up www.ascd.org, and there's an article in there of the 10 signs that your school or college has got a toxic culture. So that's worth following up on, and I'll give you the first 5. You can go and look at the how these are explained, and you can look at the other 5 by following up the link that's running across the bottom of the screen at the moment. So the first one is no clear sense of purpose, that the school that you're in doesn't really have a vision. It doesn't really have a mission. It's just going through the motions. So the senior management, your colleagues and so on, taken as a whole, the whole system is not really heading anywhere in particular, that it just is going through the motions. The second one is hostile relations amongst staff, students and parents. So wherever you go in the system, in the college, in the school, whoever you're dealing with, at some point in the day, you're likely to come up with hostility. At some point in the day, maybe you come up with rudeness or abruptness, that people are not supporting each other, that parents are aggressive, that senior management don't listen. All of those things are difficult to cope with and are part of a toxic culture. The third one is an emphasis on rules. This is the way things are done. Follow the rules, stick to the rule book, stick to the handbook. An emphasis on rules over people or fulfilling a specific mission. So if there's a sense that you're in a rule-bound culture, that you do things because the rules say so, not because there's a compassionate and supportive reason for doing so, or that it ties in with an overall mission that is inspiring to do so, then that's a sign of a toxic culture as well. It's fallen back to just dealing with rules and not dealing with people and their own professional purposes and students and their own possibilities and potentials. The fourth one, which follows from the third, is the absence of an honest dialogue. And you'll see this when you see the principal or the CEO or whatever they're called in the establishment that you work in, the leading light in the college or school where you work doesn't engage in real dialogue with teachers. There's not a back and forth. You can't just drop in at the end of the day, sit on a couch, look at the person in charge and chat to them. I have to say that in my first teaching job, that was one of the wonderful things that the exceptional principal of the sixth form college where I worked, where he had his door open, at least for the first few years I taught. That changed, but you could always find time to chat to him. So if that's not available, then, and particularly if the principal avoids difficult conversations with teachers, ducks out of them, then that's a sign of a toxic environment. And finally, the fifth point, there are 5 more after this, but finally the fifth point, that people are more involved in or invested in self-preservation than they are in collaboration, in working together. So it's a matter of protecting yourself, making sure your back is covered, and maybe a target is pinned on somebody else's back, rather than working collaboratively together and in harmony together. So the tip is this: if you do the stress test, which I will put up again in case you missed it, if you do the stress test, and if you find your score is quite high on that, and if you do the toxicity test, and you find that you're in quite a toxic environment, then at least you should do is to make sure you're doing something to protect your health, to de-stress, to ensure your well-being. And maybe this has to be done outside the institution where you work, but that you are giving time to that. But also, if the scores are high on both, and if there's that inner sense that you should be doing something different, start planning your exit strategy today. Start informing yourself. Carry on listening to these Thursday night broadcasts, because this is the topic that we're covering, and we can give you leads and insights and ideas. So if you find that interesting, share it with your friends and colleagues, and by all means join us at 7 p.m. on Thursdays for Thursday Aspirations. So thank you very much for being with us tonight, and look forward to seeing you again.